Broadcasting live from the Business RadioX studios in Sandy Springs, Georgia, it's time for Sandy Springs Business Radio. Now, here's your host.
Lee Cantor here with Rachel Simon. This episode of Sandy Springs Business Radio is brought to you by Connect the Dots Digital. When you're ready to leverage LinkedIn to meet your business goals, go to connectthedots.digital. Rachel, great show today. How are things in your world?
It's Eclipse Day.
Eclipse Day.
So
you got big plans?
I'm going to sit in my driveway and see what happens.
Don't look
up.
At it.
No, we have a great show today. Very excited to have our guest, Gloria Cantor, who is the VP of Operations for Atlanta and the Southeast region of the Association for Corporate Growth. Super cool, amazing organization doing incredible things here in the Southeast. So, Gloria, welcome.
Thank you guys for having me.
Great.
Appreciate it.
So, Gloria, tell us a little bit about ACG for folks who don't know.
Yeah. ACG actually has a brief forward mission of driving middle market growth. We are locally about a 600-member organization, 15,000 members throughout a 59-chapter association headquartered in Chicago. Locally, our members allow us to facilitate great networking and content events for them to help drive business growth.
And then how do you define middle markets for folks, just so they get
exactly. Yeah. Locally, we define middle market as 15 million in revenue, and that's gross revenue to $1 billion in revenue. National Center for Middle Market defines it as 10 million to $1 billion. Atlanta's business community and the great venture work that is done here through some other organizations. We play nice together and in our sandbox of growth equity, but really focus more on the private equity versus Series A and venture funding.
So what are the kinds of companies that you tend to work with that are members of the organization?
Yeah, the membership base is really split up amongst corporate members. We do the Georgia Fast 40 Awards, which I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit later, which for us is really great. It gives us connectivity into those really the growing industries here in Atlanta and in Georgia. You do have to be headquartered in Georgia. But the rest of our members are a makeup of advisory services roles of accounting, legal, consulting, as well as our private equity friends and investment bankers as well. And all of those kind of consulting roles that touch a merger or acquisition.
So you're helping to facilitate relationships between the company and then those.
We're the matchmaker. Yeah. The matchmaker of the, of the group. So we put about 25 events on a year, locally and throughout the country, based. We typically are not industry specific. We pretty much play in a generalist space, but ACG as a global organization will do some more specific content events for specific markets.
Yeah, I was spending a little time just looking at the kinds of events that you're putting together, and it's sort of a mix of educational, but also fun. Like you're going to the Braves game.
Exactly. We have a Braves game tomorrow, actually, hopefully. And then actually our newest kind of social event, we're doing a putting social on Thursday. Hopefully the weather holds out for us, but for the first day of the Masters for folks that can't go to Augusta. And then, kind of our next big content event is May 7th. We will be announcing our Georgia Fast 40 honorees that evening, but also have a really great fireside chat with Yum Arnold of Leapfrog Services, who also happens to be president of the board of the Federal Reserve, and Paula Takak, I'm hoping I pronounce her name right, who's the chief economist with the Federal Reserve Bank for our members and guests as well.
So where do you see, because like that mix of social, but also like educational value content, speak to the value of the social components of it. Like, how does that help facilitate the mission?
The social component really is to drive our mission is that relationship business. We are all about relationships and you fostering and building your network is an emerging leader. If you're new to or just in general, new to the industry of mergers and acquisitions, 75% of our members do business with one another throughout their membership life. So it's, are you going to get a deal on the first day? Probably not, but you build those relationships going forward for your business growth and your client growth.
That's amazing statistic. 75%.
75%. Right. I mean, and it's, we do keep our dues are a little bit higher, but it's the right people, I think, that you want to meet in the city, in the country that are, in the mergers and acquisition space.
Yeah. As my business coach would say, they meet the red velvet rope policy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Start using that one. That's a good one. That's a good one. Yeah.
Yeah. She's always like, do your clients, does this person meet your red velvet rope policy? Because not everybody.
No, that's really good. And those folks will, anybody that wants to come check us out and see an event, we will absolutely. But if you're the one that does not necessarily meet the red velvet rope, they'll weed themselves out pretty quickly.
Yeah. So you've been with ACG for almost a decade. What are some of the trends that you've seen over the last 10 years?
It's been, now that I've been with ACG and a decade seems like a really long time.
Sorry to
wow,
make you.
Thanks. I mean, it's to be, it's the best job I've ever had. But what I love about it, and the trends that I've seen, it's interesting from the networking space. We got to a point, and I don't know if it was pre-COVID. COVID's kind of that draw line for me. We're now just kind of getting out of. Folks are starting to realize the importance of building a network. We had emerging professionals and your young, what you want to call young leaders, whatever you want to call them. The importance of building that it kind of got away for a couple of years, that they were just heads down doing work, not realizing that they were going to have business development goals or other things put on them. I had a lawyer say to me at one point, if I had known the law was going to be the easiest part of my job, I would have probably rethought what I've done with myself. So I think that for me is the biggest trend is just building your network and realizing the value of who you know and who you can meet in the city, especially, as transient as Atlanta can be, on those pieces.
Yeah. I mean, you're speaking my language right there with the whole building your network. And, obviously from my vantage point with LinkedIn, like just, it's so hard to keep up with people. And so making a concerted effort to track and kind of follow up with, I haven't talked to so-and-so in a while. I should reach out to them.
Reach out. Yeah. And taking that time to go through and be like, who in my network, especially when it comes to, award season or whatever, who am I connected to, from a CEO, CFO perspective that I can invite to these events, that I can do that puts them in the room with their peers, as well as, some business connectivity with advisor partners that they can meet.
Yeah. I mean, there's the value of your own network, but then you become a valuable commodity when you can bring people together and introduce them.
Now, when you have constituents that range from 15 million to $1 billion, how do you create programming that kind of brings them all together? Because they each have different kind of objectives, goals, and needs from the organization.
Absolutely. We, from a social, networking perspective, sheer social is sheer social. That kind of touches everybody. When it comes to content, a lot of the challenges that we hear from our CEOs and CFOs and C-suites that we talk to are relatively similar. Talent, huge issue. Can't find the right people. Not sure where we're going to find them. There aren't enough of, just all of those pieces. And then we can kind of tailor, for the folks that are already equity backed, we do some roundtables for corporate, corporates that are private equity backed, because they have a whole different set of challenges and reporting and all sorts of pieces there. Growth is growth, whether it's organic or acquisitive. We also do roundtables for corporate development professionals, so strategic acquirers that are buying throughout the life cycle. So we really, we look at, we survey our folks every couple of months and say, what are your biggest challenges, and build around that.
Now, how do you work with the other kind of ACGs around the country? Or do you work together in terms of, hey, it seems like there's a cluster here in Georgia that are in fintech or whatever. We have kind of superpowers here in Georgia.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
And do you help kind of make those kind of connections?
So we do. We also both between industries. So, obviously fintech is big. all of the, and that's a much broader, much broader piece than, what do you define as fintech? And in so many different places, the healthcare tech space is huge here. We've seen a lot of manufacturing coming back as well and choosing Georgia as a place to do business. But we do connect with our other ACG chapters and really, look at how can we do programming together. There is from a ACG perspective, there's an ag tech, so agricultural, technologies that's hosted in Raleigh every year. Because they have a big ag tech space. There's a defense and aerospace contracting event in DC that we spend some folks to as well. Kind of with a cyber unit out in Augusta and some other pieces.
Right, like if you're Atlanta-centric, you may not remember that Georgia has a extensive agricultural component to the
Georgia
state.
Is a much bigger state than Atlanta that people don't realize for many reasons. But so that's where we look at it. While we are ACG Atlanta, we do look at it from a state perspective as we are the only chapter here in the state.
Now, are you doing kind of research and collecting data regarding kind of what's happening here, or does that just happen organically?
ACG acquired a company out of, I want to say Pennsylvania or Connecticut called GF Data. So they are actually a blind service. So you submit your deal based on NAICS code. So it's completely aggregated, which we can pull. We pull a bunch of data from them and they share that with us. Now, granted, it's not drilled down and because it's completely anonymous, they don't drill down to where the deal takes place. We're working on trying to figure out if there's a way to kind of get around that, to make some regional, look at things from a regional or local perspective by NAICS code versus specific deal.
Is that something the members are kind of asking
members
for?
do have access to that, as well as, from our investment banking partners and private equity folks and companies. It's a really great way to submit data with it being anonymous, unlike some of the other, there's some regulatory issues around PitchBook and some other sources from the private equity fund where this is not considered marketing because it's completely anonymous.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. So we talked about sort of like reflecting on trends in the last 10 years, but what do you see is coming down the pike?
Depends on what happens in November. I think as I'm sure most of your guests probably are like, oh, well, we're just kind of in a holding pattern. We are seeing, at least from what I'm hearing from our members and folks, deal activity is picking up. I think that a lot of folks will try and there's still a ton of dry powder and money out there to deploy. Folks are holding on to it a little bit tighter than they have in the past, but it's been interesting to see how that's going. I think it'll be, also again going with what is the Fed going to do with interest rates? It does make a bank dollar a little bit more expensive than other dollars. So we're seeing a lot more alternative investments and different strategies. It's been fun to watch the creativity of deals and how people are getting deals done in that vein.
Now, what are you seeing from the return to office standpoint?
It's a mixed bag. It really, for us, we're fully remote, and we will continue to be fully remote. We have a mailbox and a storage unit because it makes it nice, and we have great members and firms that allow us to use office space. So for us, the dollar doesn't quite make sense to spend there. It's a mixed bag from the return to office. I think most people are probably going to be, most days in the office. With Georgia being one of the first states to open, we had a lot of folks that went back immediately that weren't really, it's a small enough office and there are enough doors and safety mechanisms that they were like, you know what, we're going to go work from the office anyway on those pieces. So.
Now, what about the commercial real estate component I would imagine your sponsors and other folks that are part of the ecosystem?
We have a little bit. Our commercial real estate folks, we do work with a few different firms. But they're kind of hearing the same, they're hearing the same thing, but it is picking up, for them, it's picking up as well. As far as space being, people looking for more space.
Yeah.
In the return office. Yeah.
So tell us about Fast 40.
Yeah.
And, what is it for our listeners who may not be familiar? And it's coming up soon, right?
It is coming up in June. We just finished our application process, closed at the end of March. We honor the 40 fastest growing middle market companies in the state of Georgia. So it's based on, you have to be headquartered in the state. You can be private equity backed, but your equity firm doesn't have to be here, but your headquarters has to be here in Georgia. You have to have between 15 million and $1 billion in revenue in the most current year. So for that would have been fiscal year 23. And then we just need 6 data points. So we need 3 years of revenue growth and 3 years of headcount growth. And we do a little bit of math, and it's all math based. There's no application fee. There's no pay to play. All of the things are there, and we run the math, and we get 20 companies in the lower category, 20 companies in the upper category, and then we added the last couple of years a category of 500 million to $1 billion. That is a growing category for us, but that also falls under those same categories. So the 15 to 500 million, we get 40 companies, and then the 500 and above, we get usually about 6 to 8. And it's a lot of them are alumni that have kind of grown out of the process and are still in the middle market. But yeah, so we get 120 applications. We narrow it down via math. We actually do go out and interview them. Those interviews will start this week and next week, just to verify the revenue and headcount growth. So they give us, we don't publish any of the numbers. So it's just a really great recognition of growth here in the state. Last year, I think the companies, I have not run the numbers this year. Last year, our 40 companies, contributed over $2 billion in revenue to the state of Georgia.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I love that it's completely math-based,
right,
as opposed to there's nothing subjective.
There's nothing subjective about, and we've had people call us so we've been doing this this will be our 16th awards, technically 17 years. We did take 2020 off. It wasn't appropriate to celebrate 2019 growth in June and try and talk to a CEO in April of 2020 to figure out, oh, you did really well last year. What can we,
how's it going?
How's it going? Right. Let me not take 45 minutes of your time to do that. But it's been a couple of things. One, it's been great. All of the companies that we have are definitely great companies that are headquartered here and have really great news. And then the other piece is also watching the industry, again, going back to industries. And I should have brought that list with me and I totally forgot. How cyclical the growth trajectory of specific industries are. We're always going to get the tech companies. We're always going to get, a little bit of manufacturing. But it's really fun to watch, obviously post COVID, we had a bunch of really great construction companies because people were doing, home renovations and all of the things. It was just really on trend with what was going on nationally.
Now, looking back through those 16 years, is there kind of leading indicators? Are you noticing oh, we have a cluster here, so that might be a trend moving forward?
We do, yes and no. I think that you always get the firms that are going to apply no matter what.
Right.
And again, it is kind of word of mouth. We don't necessarily advertise it, but we have enough of inroads and that we can, go out into, chambers and other sort of things and say, hey, who are your members that should be involved in this? There are probably a few. I'm not sure that we've ever actually looked forward looking at the trending indicators. Definitely more back than
right.
forward.
But I would wonder, those smaller ones, are those emerging industries?
Probably. Yes. I think that, you have,
if there's one, that might not be, but if there's 3, all of a sudden you're like, wow, this is
right.
There's more than, where these come from.
And it also is, and it's something to look at, and we haven't in a greater ACG world is, should we take those industries and look at it from an ACG perspective as a growth perspective? Just because we're focused here does not mean that it's not necessarily growing in the industry or in the region.
Now, do you have any learnings from what makes a growing company? Are there certain things that you've kind of gleaned, oh, you know what, these all have this in common, or were there some foundational elements, or is it just kind of the usual suspects? I need talent, I need culture,
good leadership. Obviously, looking at looking at your C-suites and your leadership, we've had folks that have made the list that grew a business in a basement and just, I'm going to call it the HP in the garage, the HP in the garage, and we're going to go interview this person. To serial entrepreneurs that have come in, and this is not necessarily the first time that they've made the list. I do think that leadership at the top is probably the best indicator of if you're going to continue to grow, and building that team around you from a talent perspective and bringing your folks along for the ride. On those pieces.
Yeah. I mean, you can't underestimate the crucial importance of leadership. It can make or break.
Absolutely. And it's also seeing, there was a company here that a medical company, one of the like doc in a box type places that obviously during COVID they were the first ones to figure out how do we do these mass testing facilities. And so therefore we're going to, have significant growth. Now, the past couple of years, they've kind of pivoted and figured out what they're going to do, but it's, still in a really great position to be in. They're just not necessarily growing. They're just still, but they're still a great middle market company here in town.
Yeah. I mean, you have to, that's an example of like taking advantage of
you take advantage of circumstances and for better or for worse, looking at the landscape. You have, that just broke, I guess, this week that Prize Picks, which is another Fast 40 alumni, is just taking on again another, I think they're building a 33,000 square foot space in the Star Metals building, and bringing on another 1,000 employees because of the growth of the esports game and game betting and all of that.
And
so
Prize Picks is a UGA alum company.
It is a UGA alum company as well. It is a UGA alum company,
and Tech Village, right?
They started in Tech Village. I think they started in Tech Village. Do not quote me on that. I don't need them coming after me. But they're a Fast 40 alum as well. But I read about that last week. So yeah,
it's very cool. It must be feel great to see some of these companies that have been given this honor and then continue to
grow. And then it's also there are some folks that are no longer eligible because they get acquired by somebody else, and they're no longer technically their company headquarters is here, but they're no longer really headquartered here. The favorite phone call that I ever got was, I think a CEO called me and said, well, why didn't we make the list this year? And I was like, well, you're the 43rd fastest growing company. I don't know what to, it's all math based. I don't know what to tell you. Congratulations on your success, but, which is fun. It's fun to watch, the alumni and where they go and what they do. And are all of them great stories? No, there are a couple that have, folded or, things have happened, but, the majority of them are good.
Someone's got to be that 41st.
Exactly. And I could get a lot more CEOs in the room if I had dealt with slow growing companies versus fast growing companies.
Now, you said that right now is the time when you're looking for the people to apply.
We just finished our application process.
So it's too late now.
It is too late to apply for this year, but we do open that process again in the fall for the Fast 40. Which is our second largest event behind M&A South, which is our big conference in February, where we'll have 200 private equity firms in town. Atlanta's a really nice place to be in February when you live in New York or Boston or Chicago. Right. The folks that have moved to Miami, not as much, but so that's our site that, Fast Forward is. And to me, it's the most mission driven event that we do.
Sure.
We do celebrate those companies in June. And then we will make the announcement May 7th. We typically do that via email. This year we'll do it in person at our Spring Summit event. So that's also a time to come and meet those folks. If you are a company, a company, please feel free to check us out and find us and get involved before the application process.
What's the website?
It's acg.org/Atlanta.
I have a funny story quickly about M&A South. So one of my clients attended, and it was his first time going, and he didn't really know what to expect. And so he booked himself, and it's it runs 20-minute meetings. He had 20, he was he completely overbooked himself. And the next week we had met, and he's like, I needed like 2-3 days to recover from that because it was like he had like 50 meetings in a day and a half. It was bananas.
It is. We'll have some equity some equity firms and investment banking firms that between their team will have 200 meetings over.
It's like a day and a half.
Monday
isn't it?
it's Monday afternoon to Tuesday. Maybe some on Wednesday. Wednesday's kind of light, but it is. Yeah, and then we do offer some content. What we did this year. Instead of doing full hour-long panels. Now, we did do a couple of hour-long panels as well, but we added some micro-learning sessions just in 20 minutes so that somebody could block out 20 or 40 minutes and be like, I don't want to talk about myself. Let me go learn about AI or some other things affecting our industry, some healthcare, healthcare costs, things that folks need to know, which was really fun to watch that this year as well.
Do you offer some coaching for those firms to get the most out of that experience?
We do not, but we probably should. So we do a couple of preview events. We do a preview event. So we did a preview event in January this year. There was a deal story with Scott Devaney of Chicken Salad Chick and their acquisition of Piece of Cake because it was a really good Atlanta homegrown story. Right. And so we did that as a kind of opening networking, come meet some folks that you'll see again. Mm-hmm. But we probably should do, we always kind of communicate, here's how to best get the most out of it. One, register early. That's how you get the most out of it, is registering early so that you're in there before when the application opens to schedule meetings.
How many people attend that?
This year we had over 1,200.
Oof.
Wow.
Yeah,
nice.
We had 1,200, which in the past we've said we've had 1,200, but we were really pushing about 1,300 this year. And trying to figure out at Avalon, who's a great partner of ours, how we don't outgrow the space.
Yeah.
So we're getting there, that's a testament to the market here, right?
It's absolutely a testament to the market.
Number.
It is a big number, and it's also from the ACG perspective, it's the first kind of major conference out of the calendar year. So folks will come in to fill their funnel to hear what's going on, what are trends, what are people seeing for the year coming down the pike.
And this is human beings, so this isn't a hypothetical. Like this is like you're seeing 1,200 human beings here.
1,200, right? There are 1,200 human beings there. And the great part about Avalon is that folks can walk to lunch and have a meeting, or do there's some just really great space out there to be able to facilitate that.
Yeah, and it's always the very beginning of February.
It's the first week of February, so I guess it's the 3rd through 5th next year. We used to be the week after the Super Bowl. Now we're the week before the Super Bowl.
But it's great timing wise with the calendar because it's like you've sort of gotten through the first month of the quarter, and now
it's game on.
Yeah, it's game on. Right, it's game on. It's so funny the number of people that come back. We open registration in the middle of August, September, somewhere in there. January 1st, people are like, "Oh, I need to register."
It's like too late.
You can, but I don't have any tables. So, this year we sold out of all of our exhibitor tables the middle of December. Which has never happened. At least in the 10 years I've been here, our hotel rooms were sold, like everything, which was great. So we'll see what that trend continues at. And we're looking to add more tables. We added some more tables and sold those out. So it's all in the good problems to have category.
Yeah.
It's all of the good problems to have category for that. So.
And that's why Georgia is one of these growing states. It's like you just don't see an end to it. It's crazy.
It's right. You look at it, you look at it and it's continuing to grow. Are there a ton of folks that, from a private equity perspective, are there a ton of folks seated here, and people, not a ton, but there's a ton of investment and folks that are coming in and investing in the South and in Georgia in specific and the Southeast. That is just, it's fun to watch. And I'm not making any prognostications, but I don't see it ending anytime soon.
It's just Georgia, the economy's so diverse. Mm-hmm. That just, when one thing's down, there's something else up invariably. Exactly. It just, people don't realize how diverse the economy is in Georgia.
Absolutely. Which is what, yeah.
It's awesome. Great.
Yeah. So one more time, the website, if people want to connect.
It is, www.acg.org/Atlanta. And we're on LinkedIn and all the social medias, so.
Speaking of LinkedIn.
What a great transition.
God, I'm so good at this.
That was great.
You'd have thought I'd done this before.
So I I actually put up a post this week with this great tactical tip that I got from somebody else. So there's a gentleman named David Fisher. He actually runs a social selling program for SaaS. They have an internal social selling team, which is awesome to see. I love seeing companies investing in like a real social selling program. But his tip that he shared, which I reposted, is that he takes a stack of 10 pennies and puts those on his desk. And that is for every time he drops a comment, he moves one of those pennies over. So it's like a good way of a visual cue of activity on LinkedIn. So you could do that again for comments. Like, okay, I want to share 5 comments on posts, or you could do it for DMs, outreach. But I love the visual cue of having something because, and I do this for myself. I'm like, I really need to comment more. And then you get busy and you don't do it. So when you see something, and it could be paper clips or whatever, it shows you, did I actually do it? So that was a great
Is that weekly or is that?
Well, he does it every single day.
Is it a day? Wow.
So I'm not saying you need to do 10 comments a day, but maybe you can do 3 comments a day or 3 DMs a day or something, start small and build up. But having that visual cue, I think, is an awesome tip. I loved it.
And then from a standpoint of activity on LinkedIn, is commenting better than liking or
Yes.
how would you kind of rank order? What is the activity?
Commenting is always better because you can share your perspective on things. So not a thanks or good post or cool, but actually engage with what the person is talking about in a meaningful way, because it's a win-win. It helps the author's content obviously get more seen in the newsfeed, but it also helps you, because sometimes you'll see in your newsfeed, Gloria commented on blah, blah, blah's post. So you show up in the newsfeed, but it also helps build that rapport with the person posting content.
Is it also true that you should use more than 3 words?
Yeah, I mean,
is what I hear, from a perspective of.
Yeah, I mean, the better, the more in depth you can go, the better. I like to ask a question but comment first and then you can react. It's a better order of operations.
Good stuff. Well, Gloria, thank you so much for sharing your story today.
Thank you guys for having us.
Awesome.
You're doing such important work and we appreciate you.
Thank you for having me again.
All right, this is Lee Cantor for Rachel Simon. We'll see you all next time on Sandy Springs Business Radio.